501c4 nonprofit organization that I had formed to advocate for youth services, civil rights, basically anything involving the community where I can assist with various issues. The presentation tonight, as you can see, is community use of the Fort Washington Armory, the New York City Fort Washington Armory in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights, and after I'm done, my good friend Angela Ortiz is going to be speaking. Next slide, please. As far as advocates for equality, integrity, and who I am, just very brief. I was born and raised here in Washington Heights, just down the street, 508 West 166th Street. I have over 30 years of community service. That's outside of my day job in the IT world. I do that, this kind of stuff on my own time. I was called upon by several community members 4 years ago to investigate allegations made preventing community use at the Fort Washington Armory. And I had started to do investigation on that, and today, 4 years later, is kind of the culmination and summing up everything that I researched into. And I'm appearing here at the Housing and Human Services Committee meeting as I was instructed by the chair, Shah Ali, and that's just a little snapshot of the email where he had told me to do that. Next slide, please. All right, so when did all this begin? Next slide. Way back in October 20th of 2014, the Youth and Education Committee had a meeting, and we just took a snapshot here of all the folks that were there that night. Next slide, please. And I just included snapshots of the meeting minutes that night, as well as the resolution that was passed. And as you can see here, we had Alize Beal from the Manhattan Borough, the Manhattan Borough Director's Mayor's Office Community Affairs Unit there that night. And this resolution that was passed was basically regarding recommending joint board committee review documents on the legal standing of entities housed in the 168th Street Armory and use of the building as a community space. And if you look here in the actual resolution, the City of New York, through the Mayor's Office, recently conducted a tour of the Armory and found heavy underutilization of usable space throughout. Next slide, please. Also going back in history, just about 10 days after that famous meeting, we had the first article that was released in the media by DNA Info. And as you can see, it was nonprofit groups that are being priced out of the Fort Washington Armory. And I just highlighted some key areas. Uptown community groups offer low cost or free services to locals. Say they're being priced out of the city-owned Fort Washington Armory, which has been demanding increased donation fees while hosting more exclusive fashion and other private events. Organizers from several community-based organizations say the Armory, located at Fort Washington Avenue and 169th Street, has been giving them the cold shoulder or steadily driving up usage fees for the massive event space, with nonprofit group being asked to pay $15,000 instead of the $5,000 they previously paid. Betty Lehman, who represented that group from Isabella, confirmed that the Armory Foundation wanted Isabella to raise its annual donation from $5,000 to $15,000 for 70 hours of use throughout the year. Next slide, please. The next day, the Daily News published an article. Uptown community groups slam Washington Heights Armory for charging big bucks to use the facility. Jan Ransom. A city-owned Armory in Washington Heights played host to the hotly anticipated Alexander Wang fashion show last month. The local groups say they often can't use the space or are charged big bucks if they do. Next slide. So that's just what had happened back then. I just wanted to briefly give you an idea of the methodology that I had used in accumulating all this information. It's important to be unbiased. Everything was based on facts. I felt I had to confirm who owned the building because there was a lot of questions concerning that. I researched the history of the Fort Washington Armory, and then I sought assistance from Manhattan Community Board 12 and the various elected officials. I ended up using Freedom of Information Act requests to get accurate information. I wanted to obtain and confirm legal documents regarding policies and protocols there, and at the same time, to be fair, obtaining feedback from the parties that were involved. Next slide, please. So, as far as who is the owner of the Fort Washington Armory, several community members, including me actually, always thought that the Armory's foundation was the owner, and that's not the case. The Armory Foundation is just a licensee of the building. The Department of Homeless Services is the owner. As you can see from the snapshot from a website, one of New York City's websites, that confirms it right there. Next slide, please. A little more about the history. I found this interesting. This is from the New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs. The building was actually constructed in 1911. 1.9 acres, over 230,000 square feet. And interestingly enough, they said here, converted to multi-purpose community recreational facility called the Armory.
Phil,
Next slide.
can you pause 1 second? Do you see a pointer there, a black device?
This?
Yes. Could you possibly stand there and use the pointer, because I could tell that these members
Okay.
can't see anything that you're
Sure.
presenting.
Let me just do a little test. Am I not using it right?
Is it plugged in, first of all?
No,
It's in the
it's
computer.
wireless.
Well, you know what? I'll just use the keyboard. That's fine. It's all good. So, in terms of history of the Fort Washington Armory, I also pulled up 2 articles from the New York Times going back to the past. And as you can see there, from September of '93, that's when Mayor Dinkins initially announced a plan to transform the Armory into an apartment tower, indoor track, community theater, and daycare center. There was an article about a week later by Emily Bernstein where she talked about how the Armory was going to be converted into a community center, housing 200 families and having a modern indoor track. At that point, when I decided to go about seeking assistance from various folks, I started with Manhattan Community Board 12. And as I mentioned before, on October 20th, 2014, the Youth and Education Committee passed a resolution 29-0 to have Community Board 12 review the legal standing of entities housed in the 168th Street Armory and use of the building as a community space. Now, despite my several public testimonies at Community Board 12 throughout the years to have a roundtable discussion with all the parties involved, only Community Board 12 met with the Armory Foundation and not DHS in late 2014 and May 2015. The resolution that they passed was tabled by CB12, and there was no further attempt at any resolution after that. Unfortunately, Community Board 12 was unsuccessful in obtaining proof of who owned the Fort Washington Armory, and they were also unsuccessful in obtaining the license agreement the Armory Foundation operates under. We also seek assistance from Manhattan Borough President's Office, and from March of 2015 to June of 2017, the Manhattan Borough President's Office was kept up to date through at least 5 major email conversations. They were made aware of the Armory Foundation charging $1,850 for an event that was needing just 2 rooms for only 3 to 4 hours. They were made aware of the Armory Foundation denied requests for space where they claimed rooms were in use, but they were proven to actually be available. And they were made aware of mistreatment of nonprofit staff at the Fort Washington Armory by VH1 staff. They were able to get space for a nonprofit at the Fort Washington Armory for free for 1 event. Other than that, they've been unable to change the current state of operations at the Fort Washington Armory. As far as seeking assistance from Councilman Rodriguez, there were several attempts to email him. Finally got one face-to-face meeting where Councilman Rodriguez made it very clear that he cannot do anything about the issues and concerns at the Fort Washington Armory. He said to proceed with working with Ms. Beal from the mayor's office to resolve those issues. As far as seeking assistance from the mayor's office, in August of 2014, as I mentioned earlier, there was a visit made by the mayor's office and some members of CB12 to the Armory, and the mayor's office went on the record to say the Armory was heavily underutilized. Other than mediating conflict resolution between the Armory Foundation and GDS, former mayor's office community affairs point of contact Alize Beal yielded no more results. Paola Ruiz eventually became the new point of contact as Alize Beal vacated her position, and despite emails with her and a meeting where she visited GDS at the Fort Washington Armory in 2016, nothing came of any efforts from the mayor's office.
What's GDS?
Growth Development Services, I apologize for
What's
that.
that?
They are a nonprofit that is a licensee of the Fort Washington Armory.
What do they do?
I would allow, so we have someone here from GDS to properly explain.
Oh, I know, you do the youth program.
Correct.
Yeah, the youth
We're gonna
program.
present,
He's gonna
after
present
this.
also.
Yeah,
Talk
right,
about it.
okay.
Very good, thank you. Seeking assistance from the Controller's Office. Emails from November of 2015 to January of 2016 with Mario de la Cruz. There were no results. As far as my communication with the Department of Homeless Services, DHS, emailed and sent certified letters to them in December of 2017. I met with DHS in March of 2018 where they said they needed to do their due diligence and research. I followed up with them in August of 2018 as they had never responded back to me, and they have not followed through since then. In October of 2018, I emailed and sent certified letter asking for their comments on specific questions I had about the 2002 DHS Army Foundation license agreement, and if they had any updated license agreement after that. I received no response.
I probably lost it.
My communication with DHS in October informed them that I was going to present my investigation to Community Board 12, and I wanted to give them the opportunity to provide comments beforehand. It's only fair, right? I received no response. As far as my communication with the Armory Foundation, they officially denied the allegations that were in the DNA info and the New York Daily News articles that I presented earlier. They do have an Armory College prep program that's for track students only. They also have a city track program for middle schoolers and another program called Little Feet. In July of 2015, as I briefly mentioned earlier, I was given a quote for $1,850 to use 2 rooms for a few hours. In August 2016, I was unable to schedule use of space, being told it was booked. Turned out the space was available. In March 2017, a community member was denied access to teach yoga only because she was not part of a nonprofit organization. She was a community member asking to use space. They said no.
Can you clarify what you mean by it turned out there was no space available? How did you?
I had obtained pictures as proof, which I have upon request, with the date and time stamp for the date and time we were going to use that room,
Okay.
and it was free. We were never notified. We were just told it's just not available. And let me just say for the record that everything in this presentation is backed by facts, by emails. As I mentioned in my methodology earlier, it's about